Hello, it's Katie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make one of these earrings. So this is a kind of spinner earring, and especially with this type of bead that I've actually used, it's like a little spinning world. So we're going to be looking at how to form the shapes that we need to create the wire frames. We're going to look at some hammering, because if you can see there, especially at that bottom, you can see that shine across the metal. So that's caused by hammering the metal. So I'm using a thicker gauge of wire to get this look, just so that we get a really nice shine and like that beautiful luster on the metal there. And we'll be doing some wire wrapping, so binding two pieces of frame together, and just adding that earring wire at the very end. So just a quick look at what we're going to be using. I've got a bead, so this is actually a 12mm bead, so it's quite a substantial bead, but there's only one bead in it, so I thought why not go big. I've got an earring finding, which is up here. That's a pre-made one. And I've got some wire. So the wire I'm going to be using mainly for the frame. So this is all for the frame. This is a 1.25mm gauge wire. So for this I will be using a length that is 2.5 inches. And another length that is 1.5 inches. So there we go, and I will pop the measurements on below in centimetres for you as well if you need that. Also we'll be using about 40cm length per earring of 0.4mm wire there. The tools that we're going to be using, we're going to be using a block, so we're going to use hammer and block. So this is an 8-ounce ball peen hammer, and I've got a rubber mat under my block as well, just to dampen the sound a little bit, but it will still be a little bit noisy, so if you are listening with headphones on, just be careful of your ears when it comes to the hammering. The tools that we're going to be using are some chain nose pliers, or anything that comes to a fine tip. So I tend to use these kind of flat nose and the stubby flat nose pliers, but you can just use your basic chain nose pliers too, that just go to a nice fine tip. Also, we're going to be using some baling pliers. So these are professional baling pliers. If you haven't got them, you can kind of look around for things around your home, like crochet hooks are quite good, and the tops of nail polish, because we're going to be using this one, that's usually quite good. But I will give you the measurements of all the mandrels on these that we're going to be using. So I'm going to be using the 6-step and these 3-step, the larger chunkier ones as well. So we're going to get straight on and just move a few things out of the way just for a second, and we can get straight on and start working. So first of all, we're going to look at this slightly longer piece of wire. So this is the one that is 2.5 inches long. So let me see if I can work that out in centimetres. So that is around about 7.5 centimetres in length. I don't know if you can see that there. It's not focusing very well, but it is 7.5 centimetres. And like I say, I will pop those dimensions underneath as well. So we've got this, and we're just going to look at using our 6-step baling pliers, these ones here, and we're going to be using the smaller loop on these, so this smallest loop here. And for this, we're just going to be turning to the end. So I've grabbed my wire right at the very tip, and then I'm going to start turning this. So if you can see right at the very tip, there's nothing kind of protruding at this side, and I'm going to start just turning, and we're just turning back to the wire. So we've come all the way like so. And then we're going to do the same at the opposite side. So I'm going to turn my pliers around just because it's for the camera, so you just go with whatever's comfier for you. So I want my loop to turn exactly the same way, so I want it to turn so it sits on the same side. So again, just popping our pliers in right on the tip, and then turning as we need to until we get this loop all the way back. So then we will have 2 even loops. I'm just going to pull that back a little bit because it didn't feel like it came in enough. That feels better. So now we've got 2 identical loops. So now I'm going to swap over my pliers, and I'm going to be using this one here. So just for clarity, I've used the smallest mandrel on here, and this is a 2mm mandrel is this first loop that we're doing. So the second loop that we're going to do is this one, which is actually 12 millimeters. So what we want to do is grab this in the middle. So if we just pop this in front of the camera and just let that focus in. So I've got that in the middle, and my loops that I've just made are facing towards me. So I'm going to push these back this way. So these are going to come until they'll almost touch each other like so. So that is the perfect shape that we want. Okay, so now I've got my first shape made, which is made with this 12 millimeter mandrel here. So now if you are making your earrings, what you want to do is make 2 at a time. So make them in pairs. So just making sure, all I'm doing there is just making sure they're nice and flat, ready for the hammering. Okay, so what you want to do, like I say, is make them in pairs so that you're making an identical pair. So with this one, we're just going to leave that one to one side for a second. We are going to go in. We're going to use that 2 millimeter mandrel again, and then we're going to swap to using the 3 millimeter. So first of all, the 2 millimeter. So back to those edges, we're going to do the exact same thing, but this is a smaller piece of wire. So this is my 1.5 inch. I'm just going to measure that in centimeters for you as well, but like I say, I will pop this down below. So this is 4 centimeters. Doesn't show up very well, does my ruler? It's 4 centimeters is that one. So we've got 7.5 and 4 centimeters, but like I say, I'll pop it below. And we're going to go in and make those same loops that we made originally. So right on the very tip, and bringing that all the way around back to that wire, and the same on the opposite side in exactly the same way so that they stay level with each other. So the loop in the same direction, so keeping the loop facing upwards, and again starting that curve, and then reposition your pliers and pull this one in. So now we've got 2 loops exactly the same. I'm just going to go in with my pliers and just make sure they're nice and level with each other, as in level that way, so that like so they're absolutely level with each other. Now this is probably the most difficult bit of the whole thing, because you're using such a thick wire and trying to manipulate a small amount around a small mandrel. So we're going back down now to this 3 millimeter mandrel, and what we want to do is push these towards ourselves. So I would just do a little bit at a time, and it is a little bit harder on your hands just to push that, but it's not too hard, but it's not doable. So we're just pulling those in so that we make this little pattern here. It's like a little mini octopus with not as many legs. So there we go. So now we've got our 2 shapes ready to be hammered. So we want to pull these in together. Just make sure, if you feel like you need to cross them a little bit, do so, but you want them quite close together. Just a little bit of a gap in between it. They will open up as you start to hammer them too. So we're going to be using the hammer and block. So I've got my hammer. So this is my hammer. This is an 8-ounce ball peen hammer. And what I intend to do is I'm going to use this smooth side of it. I'm not going to use the dappling side. I'm going to use this side, and I'm holding my hammer right at the end of my hammer, because what I want is, I don't want to be actually hammering like we're hammering a nail and we're pushing it in. I just want the hammer to come down and use the weight that we've got in this hammer to flatten the metal and to work harden it, rather than actually kind of make any indentation into it. So that's why, and you'll find it's a lot easier on your arm and your hands just using it right from the very end there. So I've got my plate there. Because these are quite small pieces, what I don't want to do is hit my fingers. So I do tend to just hold them right on the very tip, and I will just do some where it's just hammering without actually holding it, just on the bits that I need to. Now the main part that we want nice and flat is this bottom part here, so we get that nice flash off it. The rest of it can be flattened, but the real bit that we want to concentrate is this little bit here. So if you see what I'm doing there, I'm kind of hitting it and I'm drawing it towards myself, so it's actually drawing the metal a little bit towards me. Okay, it will take a little bit of time just to flatten that out. Flatten out kind of loop sections as well. I want it to match the previous one that I've done. Like I say, I would normally make these in tandem, so you're doing one and then doing the other one instantly, but I thought I'd just make one and then we'd go through making this one. So there you can see, I've just let go of it just so that, no, I'm not going to get my fingers. And then really kind of, once you've got it nice and kind of flat, if I show you that there, if I just, can you see it's got that glint off it now, so it's getting nice and flat. I'm going to hold that and just continue. There we go. So if you find that it has kind of opened up a bit too much, you can pop your pliers in and kind of give it a little bit of a squish together. If any of these loops have opened up, you can kind of just squeeze those a little bit and pull them back together again too. So this piece is ready, and we're going to move on to hammering this piece now. So because this is so tiny, I would say don't put your fingers on it. I'm just going to give it kind of a good hammer like that. I'm just going to draw that in a little bit there. There we go, I'm happy with that. So these are going to sit together, and these loops want to sit on top of each other. So just look at them and look at how they're lining up for now. So let's just have a little look at that. I think we just need to pull in that underneath one in just a little bit more. So I'm just going to pull it in a little bit, so only a tiny bit. And also I just need to close up these loops, so making sure these loops are closed. So I'm just using, I'm actually like using the block to kind of work against there. So like so. And then offer it up again to the other piece and just see how they kind of fit together. I'm quite happy with that now, that they're going to sit nicely on top of each other. So now we're starting to get ready to add our gemstone and the final piece. So let me just move my hammer out of the way. Oops. Right, so what we need is our bead, which is here, and our piece of wire. So I've got a piece of wire that is, it's probably about 40 centimetres long. You imagine you've got about 20 centimetres on each side. So what we want is our bead to be able to spin, so we don't want to set it so far down that it's actually touching down here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to put the bead in first so that we know exactly where we want it to be. So I'm going to pop my bead onto my wire at that halfway point. So I'm going to find around about halfway, which is there, and I'm going to pop it in and look at there being kind of that little bit of a gap at the middle, because what you'll find is, because we flatten this, once you start winding this, the size dimension might change a little bit, and you won't be able to slide this down like you would do as if it was just a normal plain round wire. So we're just going to start wrapping at one side, so I'm just going to bring it around. So I've laid my gemstone over the top. I should have said that first. So my gemstone's over the top, so now I know this is going to be my front, because my gemstone will kind of protrude a little bit more at that front side there, but that's what we want. So I've just added a couple of wraps at one side, and then I'm going to pop a couple of wraps in at the other side. So for that I'm going to turn it around just so that I'm working on the right side for me. So I'm going to pop in a couple of wraps at this side, and then I can just push this up and see and make sure, while I've just got those few wraps on, that my bead is going to be able to move, and there I can see my bead's going to be able to move. So from there, all we're going to do is wrap up this side and wrap up this side. So I'm just going to fly through and do this little section, and I will join you back when I've got to the top of both sides. So it's just continuously wrapping over and over and over in the same direction for both sides until we've got both our wires finishing at the top. So I will see you again in just 2 seconds. If you want to pause the video here, you can. So I've wrapped up both them sides. It's only going to take a few seconds, but I didn't thought you might find that a little bit boring to watch. So we're going to now pop this little section on the top here. So we know this is the front because our wire's coming over the front and through the gemstone, so make sure you stay on the same side. Now this is a little bit fiddly just to hold everything together, just because it's a small area just to begin with. Again, I'm just going to pull these in just a tiny bit, just so that these level up really nicely together. That's better. So I'm going to hold on to my left hand side just for a second and line these up together like so. And what I want to do is I want to make 4 wraps over this section here, just this little section here. So I'm going to bring my wire's coming from the inside, so it's going to come over the top and through that loop and around, and then you're going to come back up through in between this section here. So, and what you need to do is, because we're working in a very small section and our wires are quite close to each other, we just need to make sure that none of our wires cross. We want them to all lay nice and flat next to each other in uniform. So just be careful every time you come across and you make a pass through that none of your wires are actually crossing over each other. So that's 2, and then this is going to be 3. So I've got my 4 wraps in this little section here. So the part that I've wrapped over is bracing these 2 together on this bottom section between them both, and I've got 4 wraps. And if you want to just use your pliers just to make sure your wraps are nice and neat next to each other, that's great. So now I've got that part attached. I'm going to move over to the opposite side. So my wire's coming up in between the bead and the frame, and I'm going to come down through that loop and do another 4 wraps on this side. So, and just again, just making sure, just checking that we're not crossing any wires or anything, and making sure we get no kinks in our wires as well. So just taking your time to keep everything nice and smooth, and making sure that your wires are sat next to each other really nicely. So that's 2. It's always a little bit more fiddly when you're working with a shorter length of wire as well. So they have just twisted with each other a little bit. So I'm just going to push this wire back a bit and just encourage them to sit separate to each other. Like so, and then give that a pull, that's better. And my 3rd wrap, just making sure they stay separate to each other. Push them together if you need to, just to neaten that off, and through to this side. And my last one on this side, through that loop, and push them together, just making sure that everything is nice and neat on the back, because we have to remember these are earrings. If people wear their hair up, we can still see things from the back. So now what we're going to do is wrap over this little top section here. So all we do to do that is we're going to come up through this loop at the top. So we're going to do one side at a time, so I'm going to stay on the same side that was on. So I'm going to come up through this loop at the top. So my wires just come up and across there, rather than continuing going through that little section there. We're just going to start wrapping on this top section. We're going to do 4 wraps on this top section. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's not as fiddly in that section because we're only wrapping over one piece of wire, like so. So I'm just going to finish, just pop up and do those extra wraps on that, and I'll just show you really quickly just how we finish that off in just 2 seconds. So we've got our last wraps in, we're almost there, and all we have to do now is just finish these wires off. So I've left my tail wires on so you can see, and what I want to do is, because these are earrings, I want to finish my wire kind of on the inside of this loop, because I don't want them to be really on the outside and able to catch on people's hair and such. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my wire over so it's coming towards the inside of that loop, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this wire and pop my pliers inside, so that I've got just that very, very little bit of a tail that's just over the edge of the wire, and then using the finest nose pliers I've got, so that's these ones for me, you'll probably be using your chain nose pliers, I'm just going to kind of bend that to the inside of that loop so that it's finished off on the inside there. And again with this side, so I'm going to bring the wire across, so it's coming across, and then I'm going to snip this on the inside. And like you can see there, there's just that little bit extra wire than the actual width of the piece of wire that we've wrapped. And then I'm just going to use my pliers just to nip that towards the inside. And now we know that's finished really well and really professionally. And our earring is almost ready to wear. So all we need to do now is open up our earring finding. So when you open up an earring finding, what you need to do is, let's just get that to focus there. So my opening is on the front side on these ones. So we open them, if I hold it this way, we open them like so. So we turn them away from themselves. Rather than opening it up, we open it a bit like we would do a door. And now we can pop our earring on there on the front, and then we can close up that ear wire like so, making sure that's fully closed. And now we have a completed pair of earrings. So thank you very much for watching. If you've liked my video today, please pop me a like below and leave me a comment if you can. Also, don't forget to subscribe. I've got lots and lots more videos coming up in the very near future, and I will see you again very soon. Thank you.